Welcome, everybody, to Mi Gente on Air. Thank you for being with us here tonight. I am your host, Larry Rodarte, and it's really a pleasure for me to be able to give you this information on each show that we put out for Mi Gente on Air. It is a show that is highlighting, of course, Latinos, but we also have a lot of non Latinos who are listening to the show. So thank you for being with me here tonight. And as always, if you have a question or a concern, or you just want to make a statement or what have you, please feel free to do that in the room because this is your show, Mi Gente, my people, to talk about these issues that concern us on a daily. Okay, so please be with us here tonight on Mi Gente on Air.
Welcome to Mi Gente on Air on 100.5 and 790 News Radio WSGW and online WSGW.com. Now, here is your host, Larry Rodarte.
Todo mundo pregunta por qué me enamoré de ti. La verdad
Welcome to Mi Gente on Air. Thank you for being with me here today. I am your host, Larry Rodarte, and I'm so happy to be with you today this hot summer. It has been a hot summer, a lot of humidity, and I'm just happy and blessed to be with you here tonight. And today I've got a special show, one that comes from the heart, because we're going to talk about my father and my uncle and Rodarte Builders. Believe it or not, I've never done a show on them, and I decided as it is a celebration for my family to be able to talk about the business of what they did and what they contributed to the Saginaw community. And that's what this show is about, as Latino contributions, concerns, and culture. And I say that every week. And it's just a real blessing for me to be able to do that for you here on this show, Mi Gente on Air. So in 1957, believe it or not, Rodarte Builders, as it was known in this community, the business started with my father, Valeriano Rodarte, and Manuel Rodarte. And they were migrant workers. They were migrant workers that came to the Saginaw area in the 1940s. I believe the first year that they came was around 1942. They would go back and migrate back down to Texas, and they were from Uvalde, Texas, and they would come periodically to the Saginaw Bay area, the Saginaw Bay Valley, I should say, because that's what it was known in those days. And they had it rough. They had it rough as migrant workers in the community. And I know that at one point they came with the Anguiano family of Saginaw, who were recruiters, just like many of the Bracero recruiters that during the World War II, they were recruiting men from Mexico as well as Texas to come and work the fields, because many of the men in the area were in war overseas. And so my dad, as well as many of his siblings, I think about 6 or 7 of them at the time, they came with my grandmother, who had lost her husband, my grandfather, at the age of 32. And that was in 1936. And he passed away. And so she was left a widow with 7, 8 kids. And so she had to make a way for herself and her family. And she heard about recruiters that were coming from the north, El Norte, and they got in a dump truck, believe it or not, and they headed to the Saginaw area to work the fields. And it was tough. Dad always felt real bad about how poor their family actually was in those days. It was very difficult for him to even talk about those days because it was so rough. And at one point they were living in housing in campos for migrant workers in Pinconning, Michigan. And Pinconning, which is just north of Saginaw here, they had these campos where the conditions were a little bit rough. And so my uncle Manuel, as well as my tia, my aunt Josefina, Josie, they got sick, as well as my tia Janie and my uncle Robert. They all had ailments, which later came out to be tuberculosis, and that was very frequent in those days in the campos with the migrant workers. And so many of them ended up in, I believe there was a hospital, they called it the TB hospital in Grayling, Michigan. And so I remember Dad telling me that he would often have to take his mother up to Grayling, drive her up there, and to visit my Aunt Josie and my Uncle Manuel, who were in the hospital, as well as my Aunt Janie. My Aunt Janie passed away. She was 14 years old from tuberculosis. And my Uncle Robert also passed away, and he was only 21. So they really knew hardship in terms of their siblings that got sick and passed away. But my Uncle Manuel Rodarte, as well as my Aunt Josie Rodarte, they survived tuberculosis, and they became great entrepreneurs in the Saginaw community. And my Aunt Josie, along with my Uncle Felix, her husband, Gallardo, they started the El Gaito restaurant, which was really known for their patitos through the years. They started their restaurant in the late 60s and owned it and operated it all the way until my Aunt Josie passed away around 2010. My Uncle Manuel Rodarte, he was the older brother, and he started Rodarte Builders with my father in 1957. As I said, Dad's name was Valeriano Ortiz Rodarte, and he was in a program and going to school in Chicago with my mother. They were married in 1953, and Dad was in Chicago with Mom in an apartment, and my Uncle Manuel called my dad and said, "Hey, let's start building homes." Now, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that's exactly what happened. And their first home was on Monmouth in Saginaw by 26th Street. And they built this home for a grocery owner. He had a grocery store in Saginaw, and he wanted to build a home. And so had befriended my Uncle Manuel, and they built them this home, him and his wife, and they paid them with groceries. They were able to get groceries for their families. They had both been married, my dad and uncle, at that time, relatively in the late or the early 50s, I should say. And they started their families, of course. So they had these mouths to feed with all these kids. And between my dad and my uncle, they had 11 kids. So there were the mouths to feed. I wasn't born yet, but they had to, really sacrifice, and they found a way with their third grade education to pick up a hammer and go up and, build homes. They didn't have any knowledge. Dad told me, he said basically, and this is a saying that he always said to me growing up, he says, "Larry, use your head." And so that's something I think that he had said to me, that's exactly what they did. They learned on their own. They didn't have anybody to teach them. It was difficult times in terms of race relationships in those days, of course, especially for a migrant worker with very little education. And so they, really had to work hard, extra hard, I would say, in order to make this a success, and that they did. And my Uncle Manuel, he was married to my Aunt Virginia. She was Anglo, and she had a way of gab and was able to persuade attending city council meetings where they actually were able to get permits for housing, for building homes, low income homes in the area. And I don't know if without her they would have been able to be successful in doing that, because I don't know if city council would have approved it for migrant workers. And there's a whole story behind that, but we won't go into that here tonight. But I just wanted to, make sure that she did get credit where credit was due, because she had an entrepreneurial mind, as well as my mother, Anita Diaz. They were the four that started the business. Uncle Manuel was the president, Dad was the vice president, my Aunt Virginia's secretary, and my mom the treasurer. And so that's how the Rodarte Builders, as they became known in the community, started. And, it's something that many of us are very proud. I'm talking about my family, from cousins to the siblings. to the kids of Manuel and Valeriano. We're very proud of that because the name was well known in the community for builders. And so I wanted to take the time. I wrote a story on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Rodarte Builders way back in 2007, and I wanted to read that story. It was featured in the Mi Gente magazine, and it was a grand occasion, really, where we all came together as a family to celebrate the milestone of 50 years of the business. And we all had benefited from it. It truly was the American dream. And I want to read that to you right now. Well, my producer, he actually will show some pictures that go along with this story. So back in 2007, I wrote this story, and it was highlighting the 50th anniversary of Rodarte Builders. Preface. Born into poverty in Uvalde, Texas, the Rodarte brothers of Saginaw weathered many hardships when they were young men, losing their father, Jose Casamiro, at a very young age, and their mother, Maria Refugio, struggled to put food on the table to feed her brood of 3 sons and 5 daughters. With the emergence of a demand for manual labor in the United States brought about by World War II, the U.S., with the Mexican government, instituted the Bracero program in the early 1940s. Thousands of impoverished Mexicans abandoned their rural communities and headed north to work in the fields. Maria Refugio and her children made the trip back and forth from Uvalde to Michigan with the Anguiano brothers under the program started in 1942. On their 4th trip, they stayed. Older brother Robert passed in 1947. Manuel and Valeriano married, and with the support of their wives in 1957, they picked up hammers and built their first home, setting the course as successful entrepreneurs in mid-Michigan and capturing the American dream. And the title of this story was Migrant Workers Make It Big in Michigan. And I remember way back when I was a very young boy, and I was blessed with a vivid memory at an early age and can remember when the Saginaw News article on Rodarte Builders was carried over the Associated Press wire service and also appeared in Brownsville Herald in Texas. It was the story by Jack Tucker, the writer from the Saginaw News, and the headline read, Migrant Workers Make It Big in Michigan. Even at 4 years of age, I remember being proud of my dad and my Uncle Manuel. My mother and siblings had joined my grandfather on a trip to Texas that summer while Dad stayed home in Saginaw supervising construction. Rodarte Builders was in business for 11 years, and they were making unprecedented waves in Saginaw. They would go on to build more than 2,000 homes a year for a few years at the height of their careers, shattering 30 permits a month, which was highlighted in that article. They succeeded as contractor builders thousands of homes through Saginaw, Flint, Mount Morris, Pigeon, Bad Axe, and other regions in the Thumb. It was that one article that introduced the Rodarte brothers and spoke volumes for who they were and are and where they came from. Man, when that article came out in the Saginaw News, it was really something, said Art Anguiano, a Farm Bureau insurance agent whose father, Andres, and Uncle Jesse migrated the Rodarte brothers in the back of a truck from Uvalde, Texas to Michigan. My parents remembered the Rodarte brothers when they were young boys, and they were thrilled to see that article. John Sanchez, a retired State Farm insurance agent, concurred, saying, I remember we were all proud because migrant workers had made it big, and we all felt we were a part of it. Sanchez's mother, Lucinda, was a sister of the elder Anguiano and also migrated north to Breckenridge. Our entire family was proud, and we were very familiar with the road the Rodarte brothers had traveled in being able to obtain their success. They had done it extremely well. In 1957, both my dad and uncle were married only a short time and were just starting out with their families. They were struggling with their jobs and were still trying to help their mother. The very first home we built was made from used lumber, said Manuel Rodarte, now 77. We were motivated by our hunger, and the man we built the house for owned a grocery store on Wadsworth. and he said he would pay us with groceries. So we built him a house. This is from an interview that I had done with my Uncle Manuel before he passed. The house still stands today at 3119 Monmouth, near 26 in Saginaw. At a recent gathering of Saginaw former mayors for the kickoff of the city's sesquicentennial, I spoke with a few mayors in regard to Rodarte Builders and the impact of Saginaw. Former Mayor Henry G. Marsh, mayor from 1967 to 69, said, "We cooperated as far as the city was concerned because the Rodartes were building a lot of homes and their contracts then were primarily in the city. They were well liked and respected and considered leaders in our community." The Rodartes, they built half the city, said former Mayor Dr. Lawrence D. Crawford, mayor from 1983 to 1987. They built a lot of homes at a time when people really needed them because Saginaw was a crowded city with aging housing. They built homes that were affordable for people. We were certainly fortunate to have them around. David Gomez, Chief Executive Officer of Health Delivery Inc., and who started Health Delivery, said he gives thanks to his friends, the Rodarte brothers. My friendship with both of them has been for many years, and I see that it is their persistence in their work that has allowed them to succeed. Their programs and all their hard work provided housing for many people who otherwise could have never afforded their own home. I think Cesar Chavez and his saying, "Si se puede," because truly Val and Manuel went from humble beginnings to great success and showed us that anything is possible, said Gomez. After all their success and good fortune, the Rodarte brothers never forgot their humble beginnings. I know it is hard for them to sometimes talk about when they were young. I've seen them talk with their sisters, remembering their struggles with lumps in their throats. Still, they didn't forget their people. My dad and my uncle have always looked out for the migrant families. Manuel, for the past several years, has made available food and clothing to the migrant farm workers in our county. He is unselfish in his giving of food products coordinated through Health Delivery, Gomez said. He is our unsung hero. Pam Cole, director of Saginaw's Eastside Soup Kitchen, says the Rodarte brothers are generous people. Whenever we have a need here, we call them up, and they don't ask questions. They are always there for us. Rodarte Builders, Inc. is currently managed by my Uncle Manuel's wife, Mary, near Bridgeport, and he is retired, yet doesn't sit around idle. Remember, this article was written in 2007. Anytime anyone drives through Bridgeport in the summertime, we appreciate the rows of purple and pink petunias my uncle plants from the Rodarte office all the way down Dixie Highway to downtown Bridgeport. Dad has always thrived as a workaholic, and at age 75, he stays very active with his homes. God has given him the strength to be semi-retired by choice. My Uncle Manuel and father prove that with determination and good work ethic, you can make something of yourself. I think working in the fields gave them those good qualities. I also believe my grandma Rodarte kept them in line and taught them the value of working for what they desired. My aunts, their sisters, Lupe Morales, Josie Gallardo, and Angie Blanco have worked hard all their lives too. Looking back at that article, my family was amazed that Dad's success reached us all the way in Texas. We were so proud of him, and so many years later, I'm still proud and grateful that I can honor their accomplishment with this article in Mi Gente magazine as they celebrate 50 years in the business. Their journey has been long and fruitful. Anyone who knows what it feels like to be bent over in the hot sun with rows and rows of produce can raise their glass in a toast and say salud to a job well done. Way to go, Dad and Uncle Manuel. Que si se puede. So there we have it, a story I wrote in 2007 on the occasion of their 50th anniversary of Rodarte Builders. And, that's one of the things that, like I said, they became known as Rodarte Builders in our community of Saginaw here. The way the name is pronounced, though, is Rodarte. And I say it that way here on this show, Mi Gente on Airs, in a homage to my father, because that is really how the name is supposed to be pronounced rather than Rodarte. But everybody knows us as Rodarte, and so I'm fine with that as well. But it's really something to have a witness their success as a young boy. I was born into a workaholic father and mother, and it just was wonderful to be able to hear how people always reminded us of who my dad and my uncle were and their success. And at one point in the city of Saginaw, I do believe that they were in the top five as far as taxpayers, maybe even in the top three at one point, right after the hospital, St. Mary's in Saginaw Covenant. And so that tells you kind of where the success laid. And I was trying to get one of my cousins to come on and talk. I think they're a little bit shy, but they were very instrumental. They were the older cousins that were part of the business back in the 70s and the 80s. Because Rodarte Builders kept building homes for many years. There was a recession, I remember, I think in 1978, and that is when they started slowing down. But the 60s, man, that was the prime of their business. So, it really was wonderful to know that they had built so many affordable housing, as former Mayor Crawford said, for many people, especially people of color who could not own homes in those days. But they made it possible for them. And I believe to buy a home in the 60s was like a Rodarte home was about $5,000 to $8,000. And so, it really was nice to see that it was recognized in that article written by Jack Tucker so many years ago. And it's really strange because as a journalist, at one point I worked for the Saginaw News as an intern, and I remember the very first time I sat at a desk in the newsroom of the Saginaw News. To my back on his desk was that author Jack Tucker, who was way into his elderly age, was about to retire, but I was able to meet him and thank him for that article from way back with the Saginaw News. So that's the article I wrote, and giving you some background information. I'm going to talk more about Rodarte Builders when I come back here on Mi Gente on Air. So thanks for being with me here tonight. It's kind of a heartfelt show, of course, because I'm talking about my own family, and I don't typically do that. I don't typically try to talk about my family, myself, my businesses. It just happens to come up a lot of times because that's what I know. That's Mi Gente, my people. And this is a show that has spinned off from the magazine, which is celebrating 30 years this summer, 30 years of publishing Mi Gente magazine. And so I say that as a way to really, bring about the idea that we are celebrating, Hispanic contributions in our community. And that is definitely one of them, the success and the history of Rodarte Builders. So please join us as we go back into the show and we talk more about this successful Hispanic business.
This is Mi Gente on air on WSGW.
Welcome back, Mi Gente. Thank you for being with me here tonight. We are talking about an older business that was in the Saginaw community, and it is Rodarte Builders. Of course, many of you remember it as Rodarte Builders, and it started in 1957 under Manuel Rodarte and Valeriano Rodarte. And I have on the phone here and on the live stream my cousin Randy Rodarte from Spring, Texas, and he's going to talk a little bit about what he remembers, because he was, of course, a little bit older than I was, and he was able to be in the ground running as part of Rodarte Builders while I was still a kid. So, Randy, what can you tell us about your memories of Rodarte Builders?
Memories, huh? Oh gosh. It's best that you ask me a question like
What's
direct.
your earliest remembrance of your dad in the business?
Dad in the business. Well, I remember that they had an office
On Perkins.
on Perkins, yeah, and they rented the front, and the business in the back was a plumbing business.
Yeah, and that building is still there, believe it or not, and it's right by the CAC building on Perkins today. And every time I ride by there, I think about that office, because I do actually remember it.
Wow.
And when did you start as working in the office?
Then we were emptying trash cans, cleaning the desk, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we go in the back and play with the plumbing little parts, the little copper fittings and stuff.
Yeah. I remember that too. Dad that was my first job, having to come in to clean his office, like you say, empty trash bags and all. And when I started, though, it was when it was on Dixie Highway there, and W3 Soul was in the building.
Right.
And remember all the 45s that they used to have, and they would let me have the demos. And oh man,
they used to send them out there to trash.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
they had so many and all. So, what is your recollection, Randy, in terms of the early days of Rodarte Builders? Because you were there when they were at the height of their career and really building in the 60s.
Yeah, I think that's when we moved to Creekwood, the upper side,
Bridgeport.
Bridgeport. That's where like they made it. They moved into a subdivision, Southfield. But I remember going with my dad, checking on houses, and he'd have us sweep them out, check all the cutoffs from the 2x4s and whatnot, and then bricks, stack the bricks. Or there's usually he started a wood pile fire, and then we just start throwing all things in there. For all we could have been, young kids.
Yeah. I remember the big dirt piles when they started building a home, and then building the basement. With the big, what do you call those big blocks of?
The cinder blocks.
Yeah, the cinder blocks. That's what I was trying to say. And I remember I was probably like 3 years old, and I remember my mom couldn't take care of me that day, so I had to go to work with Dad, and I just remember him supervising, and there just was big blocks of hills of sand that well, they were probably not that big, but for a 3-year-old, they were pretty big. But so I that was my first recollection of going to work with Dad and him.
It was, the thing is, what a great environment, what a great experience as a kid.
Yeah.
I was around, so many different angles, where there was the drywallers, the foundation people, the framers,
the roofers.
I don't even know if you remember the framers and these guys were men. It's like, you admired them because they didn't have nail guns back then.
Wow.
They had hammers and of course they had circular saws. But but I remember like one of the, well, there's two companies, and I don't know why I remember the cement companies. One was Jerry Kabika. He did the basements at that time from the late 60s to 70s, I think. And then there's Art Bolker. He did the concretes too, and he would have a stamp he would put on like a sidewalk.
Wow.
Yeah, and then for some reason I don't remember the electricians and the framers and the drywallers. But I vision them. I see them. I mean,
yeah. Well, one of the names that I remember that come to mind is Larry Goodall. Do you remember?
That's later in the business.
Yeah, like in the 70s.
That may. But yeah, I remember even that Rodarte sign that was on that building on Dixie Highway. Rodarte, was it Rodarte Brothers or?
Yeah, Rodarte.
And then they had B&M Construction underneath it.
Yeah. Val Emanuel Construction, another company. Yeah.
So I remember going with the electrician, and Ruben and I were in the back seat, and he was actually my dad was driving. The electrician was with us, and he was driving around town, showing Dad signs, like to give him an idea what to make the sign of, what to make it look like something. But it's really funny because back then we were allowed to cuss.
Yeah.
And this guy would say hell like every other word. And Ruben and I were just in the back seat counting how many times he would say hell.
Kind of like the Bob Newhart show. Every time they said Bob, he took a drink. Yeah.
So,
well, what time period are we talking? The 60s, the 70s, when that was going
That had to be when he moved into Dixie Highway. And that was a nursery.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Jensen's nursery.
Wow.
And so he would go there and buy those plants and stuff. Then he bought that building and transferred the whole thing. So that had to be, it's hard to say. When we moved to Creekwood, I think in that era, 65, somewhere like in that era.
Yeah, I would say 65. It's amazing to me that here you are, you relocated to Spring, Texas, and you have all this knowledge of Saginaw businesses still in your head after all these years. Isn't that amazing? I haven't heard a lot of those names or businesses. I was way too young, but it's just really neat to hear that you can recall those, and it's part of the story of Rodarte Builders. There were so many.
Yeah, and it's lodged in your. I mean, those kind of things. I don't know. For some reason, I embraced that.
Mm-hmm.
I embraced everything that was there. Because even the Jensens, they were older couple, and just the way that relationship with my dad and them were, it's like they were like friends or something, Yeah. So anyway, so one of the things, here's a kicker. Okay. So one of my crazy memories, when he first bought that property, there was no office. No apartment in the back, and there was no party hall. So that was just kind of like an open field right there.
Right.
So one of my jobs, get this, Larry. I get out of school, I go there, I get on this Boland's tractor, this little tractor, and it has a roller tiller on the back. And I would drive this thing in the back field there. That was my job. My dad would make me, stay on that thing for about an hour or so, just tearing up the field there, over and over and over. And then he decided to plant some seedlings, like pine seedlings back there. After I did all that, now remind you, this was before those apartments and that
in the Bridgeport Party Hall.
Yeah. So we're planting seedlings back there, and then a week later, I don't remember the one of the workers. His name's Red.
I remember Red.
Yeah. So he, for some reason, went back there with the tractor and tore it all up.
Oh,
My
man.
dad was so ticked off. It was crazy. I was like, and plus me, I'm like, man, all those seedlings. I'm like, man, what a waste of time.
Yeah. I can just imagine your dad too when he was upset. Just like my dad. They had the same demeanor, both of them, through the years. And just, were really, all they had to do was give you a look, really.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You didn't even need to get scolded.
Right.
You didn't need to get scolded. So, do you remember King?
I do. The dog?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember King, the German Shepherd?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, yeah. He was he was a scary dog because they had him on a chain all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the warehouse. And so the funny thing is with that dog, he would let somebody walk in, but he wouldn't let him walk out.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Randy, one of the things that the Rodarte Builders, the part of the history that I want to talk about right now is in regard to the low income housing that people of color were able to afford. Prior to their heyday in the 60s, it was very difficult for people of color to actually buy homes.
Right.
When my family moved to Woodland Court in Bridgeport, and this was in 1966, I was told by my parents that they couldn't even buy the property there in Woodland Court, that they had to have an Anglo person actually buy the property, and then they sold it to my dad. And that's how they were able to move us to Bridgeport. As you said, we moved on up. We moved like the Jeffersons, moving on up.
Yeah.
But it was a different time, a different era. The
Oh yeah.
Fair Housing Act hadn't passed yet with Lyndon B. Johnson, and so Rodarte Builders really provided a need for minorities and people of color in our community. What can you tell me about that?
Let's see. That's man. Yeah, that's when things really took off because Dad. And I don't know. I can only tell you on my side. I can't tell you what your dad's side or anything, except for. Anyway, the fact is that seems like that's when he started getting those contracts with the FHA.
Yeah. FHA, yeah.
Yeah, and doing all that. And yeah, and he had a niche. He had a niche. There, I mean, you can ask Brock. I mean, we drew some of those plans or altered those plans a lot. So they're just basic homes, affordable. And I tell you, I mean, and there was a system. How they did it. Like Wicks Lumber.
Yeah.
They provided all the trusses, so you send the plans to them, and and that's why they were able to build these so fast. I mean, like I said, these framers were just nuts. I mean, they knew the plan. They knew the plan over and over, and if it got altered, it wasn't much of an alternation. But there's key figures that my dad knew. Well, of course, my mom did a lot of the Anglo work. But he hooked up with some key figures, and one of them was Mac Thurston. I don't know if you heard that name.
No.
Okay. He was the key figure in the game of what they were doing. And I think he's the one that was able to bring them in and give them a lot of leeway, or like you said, break that what do you call it? Relational lines. Mexican type. To break that. I think he was one of the key figures. There's also a guy, Dick Wayne.
Oh yeah. Dick Wayne, Richard Wayne. I remember that name.
Richard Wayne.
There were so many, there was actually so many that were involved. And I remember Dad throwing a party in our house in the basement for New Year's or something. And I remember it because we had to clean up, but it was there. Everybody from the office came, and it was just a grand celebration, really,
Right. So, you had that. And then, like I said, Wicks Lumber. So those guys befriended my dad, and they're able to break all those lines. You know what I mean? And then, of course, the workers and whatnot, they were happy to work with my dad.
Yeah. The Coyer brothers, I remember them, your relatives, Leonard, and I forget.
Yep.
Well, Randy, you played a pivotal part in Rodarte Builders as well, because I remember you worked in the office and you were purchasing a lot of the lands. And tell me about that part of it, because you saw it for what it was in terms of the quantity and the quality of what was going on.
Yeah.
What was your title? Do you remember?
I have no idea. But I had a power attorney to sign my dad's name to buy houses.
Wow.
I knew that. But who was that guy's name? Oh, gosh. Oh, he used to buy the properties. He used to go out and find them.
Tom
Perman. Yeah.
Yep. I remember that.
He had a broker's license. So he would do that, find those. And then we would go in and buy these. And my dad would, of course, mortgage those. And believe me, a lot of these homes were ones he's built already. And there was also a company called Randall Builders or something like that back in the day, too, that had similar homes. But my opinion, they weren't as well built. But that's me. You know what was funny? My first house was on Kansas Street.
I remember.
Okay. That house was so straight. I was so proud of it.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about like the cabinetry and just everything was just perfect. Anyway, so I would go. I'd go with him, and we go to what do you call those closing people? What do you call them? And I went to ones in Detroit, not Detroit, but Flint, Mount Morris, of course, Saginaw, all over the place.
In the Thumb as well, probably Bad Axe.
Oh man, I worked out there, new homes out there when they did new homes out there.
Yeah,
did those. And then I would sign maybe four or five homes at a time that they bought back for rentals.
Yeah.
And then you got in the rental industry. They started doing duplexes first. I don't know if you remember those, the duplexes, and then he went to fourplexes. Of course, they got a little bit bigger with Andre, and then he, I think that's even post of the Gratiot apartments.
Yeah, and the Gratiot apartments today are actual condominiums over there off of Gratiot. I took Dad before he passed. I took him over there to see him. They still were up, still looking great, as well as so many of the duplexes that are around the city in Saginaw still today, that are over 50 years old, some of them. So, I was really happy to take Dad to the very first house on Monmouth over by 26th Street, and it was still up, and took pictures with him there as well. So, I remember all of us, I'm talking the boys of the family, we all had to at one point work for Rodarte Builders. And I remember being young and a teenager in the late 70s and the 80s. And your brother Rick was a year older than me, and they would pick us up. We'd have to be at work at 7:30 in the morning. And Dad would pick us up and take us to an apartment or a house, and we would walk in the front door because we had to do drywall or we had to do some type of rehabilitation. And once Dad left, we would go out the back door and we would just complain about that we had to spend our summer working on homes where our friends were at home. And I'm sure you and Brock and my brother Robert, they probably, and Ruben, they probably all had kind of similar memories, but that's what it was.
but
Be a son of Rodarte Builders, you know.
yeah, I don't know. Sometimes it was like pretty cool to do that, to be that. I mean, when I turned 16, I mean, it was like my dad couldn't wait for me to get a driver's license so I can drive the trucks.
Yeah. Well, my dad didn't wait. And I remember being 14 years old. Dad let me drive a dump truck. That's how I learned on a dump truck how to drive
Yeah.
with a stick. And
Yeah.
eventually I got pulled over on Dixie Highway because the officer said that I just looked too young to be driving. And so I did. I remember I had to go to juvenile court over that. And my mom was so mad because she said, Val, he doesn't even have a license yet, and he's already got a record. Well, Randy, thank you so much for reminiscing about Rodarte Builders. I hope my listeners out there got some good information and background in regards to the business. And it's just been a real pleasure to be a son of Valeriano, and I'm sure you speak the same way about your dad. And we really. They really contributed to the community of Saginaw here with so many houses that are still up today. So,
yeah.
Thank you for being with me all the way from Spring, Texas, Mr. Randy Rodarte, and we will see you next week here on Mi Gente on Air. Adios.
Yep. Adios. Vaya con Dios. Bye-bye. Turn me off, man.
Well, I was going to tell my cousin Randy not to go anywhere. We still had the live feed here, but it's been a pleasure to talk about the history of Rodarte Builders. I never have done that on the show, and it really was something for us as Rodarte sons to know the contribution of what my father and my uncle did, especially with knowing the knowledge that they were migrant workers with a limited education. And I just want to end this show here tonight with just making a statement about something. When my father passed away in 2020, I found an old memo sheet that was from former Saginaw Mayor James Harvey. And he was later a congressman of the 5th District of Michigan. And he actually notified President Lyndon B. Johnson of the efforts of Rodarte Builders in Saginaw and their success in meeting housing needs of wage earners in the 5,000 to 8,000 bracket. And this was at a time of the signing of the Fair Housing Act, FHA, which prohibited discrimination concerning the sale, rental, and financing of housing based on race, religion, national origin, or sex. And a few days later, on July 13, 1968, President Johnson instructed the Department of Housing and Urban Development to design the prototype of a standard low-cost house for the rural poor. The Rodarte brothers met that need locally, and the FHA helped them put working people in their own homes. So I'm real proud of that, to know that former Saginaw Mayor James Harvey actually sent that article written by Jack Tucker way back to the President of the United States. And maybe they had influence to have him sign over the Fair Housing Act way back in 1968. So that's it. I just wanted to end with that pertinent information. And we'll see you next week here on Mi Gente on Air. Adios.